Really?
Ya, sí. Pero no hacer la explicación al Zoom. No hacer la explicación al Zoom.
Sí. So good afternoon. We are just about to start. We see that we have around 13 people connected. That's awesome. We are super happy for that. So while people keep joining in this webinar, I would like to share some information, kind of technical information about how to use the Zoom platform for those of us who are not very familiar with it. So we've been learning today how to use this platform for webinars. So we will be sharing with you some of that. First of all, you will see, you should have on your screen. In this moment, none of you can actually speak, but I will allow everyone to eventually to speak. But this is the important way to communicate with us is either through the chat. That if you go below your window, you will see a bar with the number of icons there, and one of the icons is a chat. So you can type in there if you have any technical issues. Someone will be taking care of that, of the technical issues if you have any. Also, you will find another icon, another button that you can click on, which is the question and answer box. Everyone in the webinar can send questions in there, and so that will be the main channel of communication for questions, either questions that are requesting kind of further explanation or question for clarifications about any of the points and information that we are sharing with you this afternoon. So feel free to ask the questions. If any of the questions we feel that would require too much time to be addressed in this webinar, or are more related to CPT International as an organization, our colleague who's also today with us in this webinar, Alicia Rinkowska, will be answering those questions via email. So later on, we'll be sharing her email address in case you want further information about CPT International or information that exceeds the purpose of this webinar. So again, clarification. There are some buttons down there in the window, questions and answers. Through that, you can send questions. We will look at these questions and address these questions, if possible, in the moment, if it's for clarification, or we will have at the end of the presentation a space for questions and answers. You will also see a button with that says chat, so you can also type there if you have any technical issues or problems or anything. Alicia will be taking care of that. Yeah, so that's it. Maybe we can start with a little introduction of ourselves and the webinar.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, the first webinar that we are doing as CPT. My name is Maria Adelaida. I'm from Bogota, Colombia, and my partner colleague is Marcos from Argentina. I hope you like this webinar, that you learn a lot. We are here to talk around for an hour or so about what we do, what we are, where we are, and why we do what we do, especially that part. So we hope you enjoy, and as Marcos said earlier, feel free to ask any question at any time.
Just for you to know, friends, we will be also recording this webinar. So we'll keep a recording of this webinar for people who wanted to attend, but the timing was not the best for some people. So yeah, just for you to know that the webinar will be recorded. Should we start?
Yes.
If something is missing, I forgot something, I will go back. So now I will be sharing my screen with you all, the presentation. We have prepared a presentation. So yeah, and we will go through the presentation. Yeah, so Christian Peacemaker Teams is an international accompaniment organization that was born in the US back in the 80s in the context of a number of the so-called peace churches. Those among those churches were the Mennonite Church in Canada and in the US, and a number of other churches that had a long tradition and history in terms of peacemaking and nonviolence. So since then, CPT has been evolving and growing and changing as a living organism, perhaps, and also developing what we call the mission, vision, and values. So we want to share that with you so you have a brief idea of what CPT is in general, right? Not only CPT Colombia, but CPT in general. So the mission of CPT is about building partnerships to transform violence and oppression. So that was a shift in the history of CPT between in the past being an organization or a number of people organized together, believing that they would promote peace instead of creating healthy and meaningful relationships with those working on the ground, working towards the construction of a lasting and real peace. So in the photo we see people from one of the organizations that CPT Colombia accompanies. The organization is called Credos. The person with a hammer is the president of Credos. And that photo kind of reflects in a way this idea of building partnerships together into to transform violence and oppression. In terms of the vision, it's a world of communities, not only one community, but a world of several communities, many communities that together are celebrating and embracing diversity of what we call the human family, living peacefully and justly with the creation. CPT has a number of values. Those values are reflected in the way we create and nourish the relationships with our partners to reflect and honor the presence of faith and spirituality. So we will be talking about Colombia. The vast majority of Colombians are Christians in one of the many denominations of Christianity, but also CPT works in places where Christianity is a tiny minority. And therefore, that's why CPT wants to honor the presence of faith and spirituality in the broader sense, not only Christian faith or spirituality. Strengthening the grassroots initiatives. So we work closely with those grassroots organizations, people gathering together in a house of a family, organizing themselves, creating ideas, non-violent ideas for resistance against the oppression and violence, transforming the structures of domination and oppression. And in my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful values related to being that creative nonviolence, embody creative nonviolence. So our body becomes that idea of nonviolence and liberating love. So CPT International as a whole has teams working in several places in this moment in the world. So So just for you to know, I'm not looking at the chat in this moment. I will open up the chat just in case someone is saying anything. Okay, here it is. Yeah, so now I can read if someone is typing on the chat. Also in the questions and answer, remember you can type in any questions, or please let me know if we are going too fast or too slow. If you're getting bored, you can also say that. So CPT is present in different capacities and ways in different places all around the world. So we might make a division, perhaps. I'm sorry, that was my mistake. Sorry for that. That was a spoiler for what is coming next. So we're back. Should go somewhere here. Okay, right. So so we might make a division between the different types of or capacities of teams. So we have kind of temporary or circumstantial teams working on the ground, and then we have permanent teams working 7 days a week, all year round on the ground. So the first one is what we call now the Turtle Island Solidarity Network. Is a very novel idea that CPT, mostly Canada, CPT created to work closely in partnership with the indigenous peoples in Canada, what we know today as Canada, Turtle Island, in the indigenous vision of the world. We also have temporary presence at the border between Mexico and the US, accompanying migrants trying to go through the border into the US, mostly into the US. So accompanying migrants and refugees. We have a permanent team. So the coming are the permanent teams. We have a permanent team in Colombia.
And here we are.
Yeah, so we will be speaking more about this. We have a team in Palestine, in the city of Al Khalil or Hebron, in the southern areas of the West Bank. This is the oldest project or program of CPT. It's been there continuously unfortunately, for 25 years. Unfortunately, in the sense that, yeah, they shouldn't be there anymore because there should be peace already now. So we have a permanent team in the city of Suleimani in Kurdistan, in the Iraqi region of Kurdistan, and a team working with migrants and refugees in the island of Lesbos in Greece, right in front of the coastline of Turkey in Greece, but very close to Turkey, attending the needs of migrants and refugees, mostly coming from the east, but also from the south, trying to reach Europe. So we'll jump now into Colombia.
Great. So what we should know about the CPT Colombia team and why you are here is that CPT arrived in 2001 to Colombia, invited by the Mennonite Church. And the team is located in a city called Barranca Bermeja. I know it's very difficult and confusing to say this word, but even for us, but this is where we are. Barranca Bermeja is located in the Magdalena Medio region, which has puts together some of the departments or states, we might call it, in Colombia. So as I was saying, we arrived here in 2001, and it was mainly because the city was under the paramilitary and guerrilla control. And it was Barranca Bermeja was one of the most conflicted areas in Colombia. So we have here a lot of rural communities, a lot of social and human rights organizations, and they have requested international presence to accompany them. Why? Because they needed to be more visible nationally and internationally to amplify their voices, the voices of the oppressed, and enhance the security. We will talk about why we accompany the communities and why they feel safer with us. CPT is also offering, as Marcos was saying, this faith-based support and psychological and pastoral accompaniment. This means that we are aware that Colombia is one of the most, well, it's not one of the most, but it has a lot of Catholic and Christian believers. So we are trying not to offer them an emphasis on religion, but basically on faith and spirituality, and how people nationally can embody this spirituality. What happened in Colombia? Well, some of you might know we've been under more than 50 years of multilateral, asymmetric, internal armed conflict.
Get closer to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying that most of you might know we've had more than 50 years of multilateral, asymmetric, internal armed conflict between the state and some paramilitary and guerrilla groups. And this has been fueled by multinational companies and the US foreign policies that has backed the anti-communist and the thinking that you should be against military coups in all Latin America countries. Basically, what multilateral means is that the Colombia government and the regional elites fight against guerrillas and paramilitary groups as FARC, the ELN, the ERP, the EPL, and a lot more. And some of the drug trafficking cartels. That means that we have a lot of different actors that are involved in the armed conflict. What asymmetric means is that there are really different power ways of making war. So basically the tactics, the strategic and the logic of war changes between the state and between the armed groups. This makes that between the state and the guerrilla is a lot of information of how they are located, but most of the time they can't fight the guerrilla groups just because of this guerrilla war, which means that you strike, you fight against the government, and then you run away. What has happened during the conflict is that, according to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, Colombia is the world's largest massive internal displacement of population, and we have over 7.5 million internal displaced people, which is a lot. And we understand that we are not the country with the largest displaced people externally, because this is outnumbered by Syria or Lebanon or maybe even Palestine. But it's definitely the world's largest internal displacement, internally, I mean. And this has happened mostly since 1995 until 2008, where the war increased due to the far-right paramilitary violence. So this paramilitary violence started in the 90s, and it has become one of the most violent groups that we've had in all of the conflict. So this war, this armed conflict that we have, is increased by the coca crops and the cocaine exportation, and the control of the mining, the gold mining, especially the artisanal gold mining, and the links between the monocrops and the large companies. Yeah, this represents a lot of unsafe spaces for the campesinos and mineros. Farmers, yes, and miners. So this can actually help or increase the internal displacement that we have already. So this is a phrase that someone from the community that we accompany, one of the organizations that we accompany, which is called the Organización Femenina Popular, which is women's popular organization. And some of them, well, a woman from there, she said, every Colombian family has been displaced or is a victim of violence or is still searching for someone who remains disappeared. We have not only the conflict, the actual conflict, understanding it as a war, as a constant war between the state and the armed groups, but the implementation of the transitional justice mechanisms, and this implicates this search for disappeared people or people that we don't know where they are or what happened with them. So this was something that one of the women said. Okay, so back in 2016, the peace negotiations between FARC and the government happened. Unfortunately, the referendum that allowed us as citizens to participate in whether we should sign or not the agreement, the no one, unfortunately. And after the no one, for several reasons, especially propaganda, we think, the government and the guerrilla negotiated again and signed the final peace agreement in November in that same year. So from 2016, we started to implement the transitional justice mechanisms. And this peace agreement had 6 points or 6 principal issues that we should focus on. The first one is a comprehensive rural reform, which has never happened in the past, and wants to give the farmers a place to work in and to really know where they belong and to recognize that they have located in a specific point of the territory. The second one is political participation, which is like a democratic opportunity to build the peace, which represents basically that this FARC guerrilla had the power to participate in the government as an opposition party, as a left party, and they have last year and this year, they have, for the first time in more than 50 years, they have voted for president and regional governors. The end of conflict basically is that the FARC guerrilla was gonna stop killing and kidnapping and disappearing people. The fourth one is the solution to the problem of illicit drugs, and this point is very complicated because we have a lot of national plans that aim to eradicate these illicit drugs of the Colombian territory, And some of the farmers have done this, have approached to this program, but some of them have not. So we're still struggling with this. The fifth point is the agreement regarding the victims of the conflict. What is going to happen with the victims? How are they going to participate in the post-conflict scenario? And how we as government and the society can compensate them, so to speak, them for what they've been through. And the final point of this agreement is the implementation and verification mechanisms. And this is where the transitional justice comes in. And basically we have a great system composed by tribunals, the Truth Commission, and a unit for the search of disappeared people. So we are still implementing these mechanisms, and we'll see what happens then. Okay, so what are the challenges now? So the ELN and the EPL guerrilla groups are two of the largest guerrillas that we have after FARC demobilized. And these two guerrilla groups are active and expanding. And these guerrilla groups have taken over the territory that the FARC guerrilla left because of the demobilization. So we are now facing an increasing of the ELN and EPL members. And also we have dissidents, which means that not everyone in the FARC guerrilla demobilized and approach to this transitional justice scenario and post-conflict scenario. So some of the dissidents, some groups of the FARC guerrilla are still active and are still fighting as the FARC guerrilla used to. So these coca crops substitution programs has increased the risk for the farmers, not only for what I said before, but mainly because these coca crops implicates a lot of money, and some of the farmers are willing to let go the illicit crops, but is not only depending on them. And most of the times they just have relations with people that are involved in the conflict that forces them to keep the illicit crops. There has been no land or economic reform, which has been one of the most problematic situations for us in the transitional justice and the post-conflict scenario, just because we haven't approached this point of the peace agreement, which was the first one. And basically the rich are richer and the poor are poorer. We keep thinking on low added value goods and an extractivist model just to export to one of the biggest countries worldwide. The new government, as I told you, the FARC guerrilla group last year had the chance to vote for the first time in so many years for president. So the new government elected last year has made such a great effort to modify and block the peace agreements. And this has stopped the willing for these guerrilla group members to approach to the government and to participate actively of this. And this new government also is they suspended the peace negotiations with the ELN, which had been in Ecuador, because, well, the guerrillas are different. They didn't consider the differences they have, and the negotiations didn't prosper at all. So we're still figuring out what to do with the ELN and how to approach this and how to end the conflict with this guerrilla, which now is the largest in the country. And we have to understand that one of the main challenges is to understand that collective protection measures are needed but difficult to apply. So we are thinking, or the government is thinking, that maybe it's easier to protect an individual but not a collectivity. So we have to keep that in mind to honestly comply the peace agreement and fulfill them. So defending life after the peace agreement has become a life-threatening task. Some of a lot of social leaders and human rights defenders have been killed, assassinated, and this has increased after the peace agreement. So from January to March 2017, the deaths were a lot bigger than what happened in 2018, but we're still having some real issues with the protection of human rights defenders. And the state response has been hiring bodyguards and buying bulletproof vests and armored vehicles, and this is not enough. And some of the times the human rights defenders are assassinated, even having these measures. And these three measures cost around $137 million a year for 5,800 users, which is not that much. But the state is not taking care of this situation, and we are still facing assassinations and violations of human rights and humanitarian international law. So as I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, this is what a man from one of the communities that we accompany said to us. And he said, "I feel safer when CPT accompanies me." And what we see is that CPT's presence increases this political cost of an attack to a human rights defender. We have a lot of political advocacy. We have a lot of political advocacy, and this has helped the communities to trust us this kind of power to let the world know what is happening here in Colombia and with the communities, and to prevent these armed groups to violate their human rights, basically because of what we do.
Right, maybe I will continue. Please let me know, because the microphone is over there, so let me know if my volume is not loud enough. Okay, so I need to reconnect to the presentation. Sorry for that. Our partners. So thanks, Maria Adelaida, for sharing this context. There's so many other things that we could share in this time, but we want to keep it short and maybe give you some space at the end for questions and answers. I just want to highlight something that Maria Adelaida said about the collective protective measures. So that's part of the mandate that the state had after the peace agreements, to provide and implement efficient collective protective measures for communities and organizations. So what does it mean? Like having a bodyguard with me all day long, it's a protective measure, let's say a protective measure for me, but it's not a protective measure for the whole community. Creating and implementing efficient protective measures for communities and organizations is not an easy task, because it's related to having the whole state involved in this process. So all the institutions, civil institutions of the state have to be involved in the process of the guarantee of safety and security for communities. That means providing good communications, and that means transportation and roads and telecommunications, internet access, but that also includes the guarantee of their livelihood, the way to gain their own money for every day. Because poverty is also a vulnerability when you are living up in the mountains, very far away from the urban centers, having access to services, basic services, and we are talking about clean drinking water is not available. People drink water from the rivers that are very polluted, or drink water from the rainwater. Do not have toilets as we know them in the city. People have very limited access to education and health services. So it might sound disconnected to think of security and safety when we talk about education and health services, but it's all connected, and communications, you know, and having a state that is responsive, not only through the army, through militarization, but also through all the institutions, the civil institutions that are promoting the fundamental rights for the communities. That's what the communities are needing. And that's where our work is located. Our work is located in that space where the state is not present. We are not providing security as a bodyguard can provide. We are raising, as CPT and volunteers, we are raising the political cost of violent attacks against communities and social leaders and organizations. So we are fitting into that slot of the political spectrum. Going back. So a little bit of our partners. So we wanted to share, perhaps briefly, a little bit of our partners. So on the right, left, that's the left, not the right. On the left side of the screen, we can see a gathering of the OFP, Women's Popular Organization. That's a 48-years old organization that was created and founded by women here in the city of Barranca Bermeja. Is the oldest women's organization in the country. And I wonder if it's perhaps the oldest women's organization as such in the region beyond Colombia. And they are extremely active in the defense of human rights as a general, with a very special focus on women's rights. So very briefly, one story related to the OFP. So one night, my colleague and I received a call from the president of OFP. They were tracking down a man who was disappeared a few hours earlier in the township of Puerto Wilches. It's about 45 minutes by boat from Barranca Bermeja, where we live, but that was at night, and boats do not travel on the river at night. So after 5 or 6 p.m. in the afternoon, you will not find boats traveling. So we had only a chance to go by car. So the women of OFP requested our presence and their accompaniment with them at the police station in Puerto Wilches. So when we arrived, this man, then we learned a little bit more of the story. What happened? What happened is that a group of paramilitaries was chasing this man because he was doing businesses with the enemies of that paramilitary group. It was a transportation thing. So this man was requested to transport some goods, probably cattle, from one place to the other. And these business of this man displeased this paramilitary group, so they were chasing this man, and the family didn't know where he was. So when the OFP women and my colleague and myself arrived in the police station, we found the captain, the highest in command in the police station, the Captain Rivera. He was there with Luis, the man who was missing, who was completely in shock. He was not able to articulate any word. He was absolutely in shock. So after a long discussion with the police captain, who was absolutely denying, completely denying whatever what was happening, and forcing Luis to tell us and the women of OFP what they had agreed to say, they released Luis, and they came with us. He came with us to his house to pick up some clothes and leave the city. So he changed clothes so nobody would recognize his clothes at night, traveling to another city. So he decided to hide in another city with family somewhere else in Colombia. So that was the story at that moment. That's everything we knew about the story. But then we learned that Luis was found by the police in a cantina, so like in a bar, drinking beer with other men. And then we learned that actually these men were actually paramilitaries who were trying to assassinate him in the middle of a fight of drunk men. So they were trying to have him get drunk and generate a fight so they can shoot him on the spot and then run away, and the crime will appear as just a fight of two drunk men, and one of them had a gun. And the police, it is known that this police captain is, to say the least, very well connected with the paramilitary structures of the region. So he was trying to cover up the incident, saying that there are no paramilitaries in his town, that nothing of that was even close to reality. So after putting the formal complaints at the higher level, so the boss of this captain, this captain was removed and placed somewhere else. So in this moment, the police station of Puerto Wilches has no captain because he was removed, probably as a consequence of this event and many other situations in which this captain was covering up paramilitary activities. Just to say some more about this captain, so he was in charge of the eviction of the Guayabo community back in December 2017, not following any procedure and violating a number of human rights and fundamental rights. So yeah, this is the reality of the small towns and villages and townships we work in with the communities. They have to face not only the reality of guerrilla plus paramilitaries plus drug trafficking cartels, but also the infiltration of all these violent structures in the state institutions. So I don't want to extend too much. I want to give some space for questions and answers. Briefly, to speak about collective protective measures. So the guy down there on the right of your screen, this one is Carlos Morales. He's the one who said that he feels safer when CPT accompanies him. Because of the many threats, death threats that he has received, and the very high risk of his work, he was granted a security scheme. That means he has 2 or 3 bodyguards, 1 bulletproof armored vehicle, a bulletproof vest, and some additional communication like a phone and many other things. which is insufficient most of the times. As you can see up there in the upper right corner of the screen, you see a photo. That photo is the safe haven that the organization he's president of created in the area of the northeast of Antioquia. Antioquia is a department in the country, one of the wealthiest, the richest departments in the country, but is completely ill-distributed. So these people, Carlos and his organization, Caucopana, works in the areas that are completely forgotten and neglected by the government of the department. So you can see that house over there is in Lejanías, and that is a safe haven that Caucopana has created as a collective protective measure that the state was not providing to the farmers and miners. So this organization decided to do it on their own. So they created this space as a safe space that is protected under international humanitarian law to help farmers and social leaders and miners who are living and working in the area to hide for a while, to find shelter for a while when they are being threatened or persecuted by illegal armed actors, so they can find a place to stay for a while. It is also a farm, so they can continue working on the farm while they stay there. And it's, yeah, so this is a space for them to be protected. I'm reading a message here, sorry. So we got a message, a question here. Oh, sorry. And we go here. We got a question, but I've lost the window. Here it is. So we got a question, and perhaps we don't want to extend too much. We have still another 10 to 15 minutes. The question is, what do you personally find the most challenging about your work? So we'll go to that question, but first I want to invite you, for me,
to become a peacemaker.
Yeah, to become a peacemaker. So we will go to that question and the other questions that you may have. So remember, you can type in your questions in the question and answer window. So if you go below in your window, or on top, I don't know. So there is a menu and there is a Q&A button. If you click that, a window will pop up, and then you can type questions, and we will look at these questions and try to answer them accordingly if we can. So is this me or is this you?
It's you.
It's me, okay.
Yes.
So we had divided the presentation, I can't remember.
Apparently it's not that clear.
So we want you to become a peacemaker, and there are many, many different ways to do that. So being a peacemaker is not only working with CPT. So we want to encourage you to be peacemakers in your community. But when it comes to CPT, we want to invite you to a number of things. We want you to learn to support and to spread the word. So what does it mean? We want you to come and visit us in delegations. So we have 2 delegations a year, one in Spanish. All of them are international, so everyone is invited. So one of them is in Spanish and the other one is in English. There you have the dates for the delegations 2020. So please go and visit our website. I will leave the website address later on in the presentation. So you can go there and find all the information. If you don't find the information, don't worry, we'll make that information reach you. What else? We want you to support us through donations. You know, CPT gets the vast majority of its money from individual donors and people putting $10 or $50 a month or whatever they can into CPT. So when I say the vast majority, I'm talking about around 70% of our budget comes from donors, from individual donors, people like yourself, like your family. You're willing to donate to a good cause. So help us accompany Moncho. Moncho is this guy in the motorbike looking at you saying, hey, please donate. There you have the link. You can click, no, you cannot click in the link, but you can go into the CPT webpage and help us with $10. you know, with $50, we go back and forth to visit one of the communities. And we do that around once a month. So $50, that provides us enough resources to go and accompany a community for a number of days, for like around a week. And finally, help us spreading the word. What does it mean? You know, talk to your family, talk to your friends, tell them about peacemaking. What does it mean? Tell them about what you've learned today about Colombia. Tell them about nonviolence. Tell them about everything all these questions that you may have. Engage with people, spreading the word of nonviolence, of peacemaking, and of course CPT. So
and here we are.
And here
we are the CPT Colombia team.
Yay! This is the full CPT Colombia team. So from left to right, so we always start on the left. On the left, Carolina Gouveia Santana, she's our project support coordinator. Then it's me, Marcos Knoblauch, then Marcela Cárdenas, then Pierre Shans, then Maria Adelaida Dondoño, who's there, and then John Henry Camargo Varela. And so we are leaving there our contact details. Then we can go to the questions. I think we are on time.
Ready to go.
Yes. So what do you personally find the most challenging about your work? Do you want to start with that? Or I can start if you want.
Yeah. Go.
Okay.
I'll think about it.
Okay. So there are several things that, in my opinion, and for each of us is different. So everyone experiences violence, and the work we do and the work of non-violence, we experience it in different ways. So I've been on team for over 2 years now, 2 years and a half, and it is still challenging visiting a community or visiting a leader and hearing their stories, very long and difficult stories. I still find it challenging, you know, to stay, to be present, to stay there, to listen. And oftentimes I cannot provide anything. I cannot give any good word of encouragement. And I would like to give some words of encouragement, but I can't. So this is challenging, finding myself in that space of powerlessness with our partners. It is challenging, but at the same time I think it's the actual value of our work. Standing with them, steadfast, in solidarity, creating these healthy and living relationships with our partners. So this is what I can say right now. Perhaps there are many other things.
What is the most challenging thing for me? I think I was gonna say something really similar of what you said, and it's to think that we are superheroes and that we are gonna end the violence and the irregularities or everything that is wrong in this country, that we are gonna fix it. But besides of this, I think one of the most challenging things is to see myself or to see ourselves in a risky position, or that we put our life at risk, and then think about how the leaders or the social organizations or the human rights defenders are putting their own lives at risk every single day, and you can do anything about it. And you have the feeling that, yeah, you are with an international organization, and you are kind of protected by international, I don't know, like the international vest, sort of, but they don't have any of that. So I think one of the most challenging things is to be aware of the violence that people can face every day, and you, even though you are part of it, you're not, and you're not going to suffer it as they do. Yeah.
It is. So I might say that perhaps it's not as relevant as the previous challenges, but this is challenging. I'm showing you the actual temperature that we have today. Yeah. So
in Celsius degrees,
oh,
right?
Yeah, in Celsius. I don't know what is that in Fahrenheit.
I don't know,
perhaps
like 1,000.
Yeah, like 1,000,000 Fahrenheit. So it's really hot, and all day long. It's not only like at noon. No. We wake up at 7 in the morning, and it's already over 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what translates into in Fahrenheit, but it's extremely hot all day long. And it might sound like irrelevant, but it's not. For those of us who were born and were raised in places with different seasons and colder weather and so on, it is exhausting. And every time we are reminded of these when people come from abroad and visit us, and after a week, people are exhausted of just the heat. So it's a minor, perhaps, detail, but not that minor.
Please don't get disencouraged to come.
Oh yeah. Sorry for that.
We want you to come. Just be aware of the heat, and
1 week is fine. Yeah. 1 week is fine.
Yeah.
So
maybe 2 years is not that fine.
So we'll try to go through the other questions. So one of the questions is, if I'm getting the question well, whether spreading news online on social media could endanger our partners. Yes, it can endanger our partners. And that's why we're, like, as CPT Colombia, we're very careful about what information we share on social media. So we have a mechanism.
And how we share it also.
And how we share it, yeah. So, and it's also kind of deeply rooted in the values of CPT, in the sense that our work is to amplify the voices of our partners, right? So that means that whenever we want to publish something really that could expose our partners, we'll go through their advice first. Or we have a number of advisors here in the city of Barranca Bermeja who are social leaders and like have lots of experience working in the region, who can give us a good advice whether, okay, this information is not good for social media, this should be used with more caution. Yeah, so we're careful with that. Do you want to explain the second one?
No.
No? Okay, so the second one is about...
Sorry, John, but I'm not that sure if I understood the question. You were asking the land ownership in Colombia, and if there are deeds to land, is there legal support, occupancy rights? Well, the thing is that I don't know. I mean, the problem is, this is why the peace agreement has the first point based on the rural reform. In the big cities, we have the land ownership pretty clear, basically, but the rural areas are more complicated. So the communities that we accompany, basically, as far as I know, they don't have land ownership, but they have been established in the land for a lot of years. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can perhaps add a little bit to that, considering the timeline. So land distribution, most land distribution in Latin America has always been not very distributed, let's put it this way. So there's big chunks of land that has been always concentrated in a few hands, right? Throughout the years, and I'm talking about perhaps the last 200 years or 250 years, this land has been kind of partitioned and divided and so on. But the way of registering the land was at the same time evolving and being created. So the mechanisms of land registration are still being developed, let's put it this way, or the institutions dedicated to kind of register the use of land is very recent. It doesn't have more than 50 or 60 years. And in the rural communities or in the rural areas of the country where the state is not even present, the institutions, the administrative institutions dedicated to land ownership never arrived. So there are no clear boundaries between state land and the private land belongs to whom, and if that land was sold and changed owners, and the occupiers changed. So it's all a mess. It's all a mess, and it's very difficult. So whenever there is a problem, which is actually the case, the cases we work with, rural communities who have been living and working the land for over 2, 3, 4 decades are now being forced out of this land. There are laws that that clearly give sorry, I lost my words. So there are some laws, and there's a legal system that should actually provide land to those who have no land to work on, right? Especially if they are victims of the armed conflict. So victims of the armed conflict can apply and obtain some plots of land of state land, right? But when it comes to communities or people, farmers who have been living on a piece of land who formally belong to someone else, but they've been living there for 20 or 30 years, and they are also victims of the armed conflict, then private property and the right to land, they clash, they collide. The two rights, the right to live, the right to have a life plan. So this is one of the fundamental rights, the right to have a life plan, a life for yourself and for your family, collides and enters in kind of a clash with the right to private property. And you know very well, I think it's the same in wherever you are based, but also here in Colombia. Oftentimes private property, the right to private property is more important than the right to life. So it is I think it's a great question, and it really kind of goes to the heart of part of the conflict in Colombia. So I hope that kind of gives you some clarity, or perhaps questions, not clarity. So the last one.
And the last one is Pamela asks if there are concerns still about the LGBTQ communities and the, I don't know how to say this word, conscientious objectors. I did my best.
Should I?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes. So the question is related to LGBTIQ people and conscientious objectors in Colombia. It is still a concern, and Pamela joined the delegation back in 2009. So if you want to know more about delegations, Pamela can share with you. So yes, there are still concerns for both groups of people that you named, the LGBTIQ people and conscientious objectors. So the legislation regarding conscientious objection has evolved and changed. However, it is still an unresolved issue in Colombia. And of course, the situation, of course, I shouldn't say of course, but unfortunately, the situation for LGBTIQ people in Colombia hasn't evolved positively in the last years. There are some, I would say, positive developments in terms of organization, of collectives and groups of LGBTIQ people doing a very interesting work, organizing themselves and creating reports to be presented to the different mechanisms of the transitional justice system. So the peace agreements created three institutions: the Truth Commission, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, and the Search Unit for people who are disappeared. So the LGBTIQ communities, or different groups and organizations, are also working hardly and a lot to present reports to these institutions. So yes, those are still concerns. And the last question that we have is about an update from Marian. Hey, Marian, about Las Pavas. So, the Las Pavas is one of the communities that CPT Colombia accompanies, and we've been accompanying this community for over a decade. I can't remember the exact number of years, but many years, over a decade now. So recently the National Lands Agency arrived in the community and divided what is being ruled by the court as state land. So they kind of put a clear division that divides, what is state land and what is still private land that is still being kind of disputed. And I say like this is not really a dispute between the community and the palm oil company. A few years ago, a number of men were incarcerated after a ruling from the judge who found them guilty of violence and attacks and participation in paramilitary activities. So the time in jail for one of these persons was exchanged. So this person was sent to home. So for home incarceration, I don't know how to name that in English. So he had home detention, but instead of staying home, he went back to Las Pavas, to the plot of land known as Las Pavas, and he is now claiming part of the territory and the house that the palm oil workers used to stay in. So the threats and the risk for the community is going up in this moment for Las Pavas community. So we are following up on this. This is recent news. This happened a couple of weeks ago. So the lawyers are presenting new complaints because of that. The population of Barranca Bermeja is around 300,000 inhabitants, if I'm not wrong. So we are checking on Wikipedia. Sorry for that. No, that's wrong. That's a very old census.
You have to trust Wikipedia.
But it's around 300,000, 400,000 inhabitants in Barranca Bermeja. So Barranca Bermeja is not a capital city, but acts as a capital city because of the refinery, oil refinery that is in this city, one of the largest refineries in the city, and yeah, so it acts kind of a
largest
regional.
in the country, right?
No, it's not.
It's not.
In Barranquilla is the largest.
Oh.
So it acts as a regional economic center and hub for the whole region. So it's a big city for not being a capital. Yeah, so we don't have any more questions, do we?
No.
Big city, small city feel. Yeah, that's how it feels. So thanks, Marian, for that. That's so accurate. Okay.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I really hope that you enjoyed this presentation as much as we did preparing it and doing it. This is our day-to-day work, and we are so proud of it, and so happy that we have the chance to do this. It's really a challenge to be part of the CPT team in Colombia is a challenge, basically, and there are little challenges that comes every single day that we face in the best way we can. So in case you have more questions or you have new questions later on, or in these days or next year or whatever, you can email us, you can send us, you can text us through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we will be reading you. So thank you so much for being present, for listening, for participate in the webinar that we have. And yeah, see you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, we hope to see you here in Barranca anytime soon. Next year, remember, delegations. Yay.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.